In March 1942, the Nazis ran the first ever official transport of Jewish women into Auschwitz. Close to 1,000 women arrived on that train. Within a few months, the overwhelming majority of them were dead. The camp had been built to work that way. The food given to prisoners was calculated to be just below what a human body needs to survive. The labor assignments were designed to finish what the starvation started. It was not cruelty for its own sake. It was a system. So when the camp records from late 1942 show one woman from that original transport still alive and still in relatively stable condition more than a year after arriving, that is not a small detail. That is a question. Because the only way a Jewish woman survived Auschwitz past a few weeks was if something unusual was protecting her from the inside. That something was a young Austrian SS guard who had been stationed at the camp warehouse where she worked. He had broken the most serious rule in his own organization by developing feelings for a Jewish prisoner. Under SS law, that offense was punishable by death. He knew that and continued anyway for over 2 years, hiding food for her, warning her about which days were dangerous, and eventually running to a gas chamber to pull her sister out of the line before the doors closed. His name was Franz Wunsch. Her name was Helena Citronova. And the most complicated part of their story did not happen inside Auschwitz at all. It happened 30 years later in a Vienna courtroom where Helena had to decide whether the man who saved her life deserved to keep his own. In early 1942, the government of Slovakia sent letters to Jewish families across the country telling their daughters to report for a few months of work. That was it. A few months, then home. Hundreds of families read those letters and believed them, packed small bags, and said short goodbyes at train stations. None of those goodbyes were short enough for what was actually coming. Helena Citronova grew up in Humene, a small town in eastern Slovakia. Her father led prayers at the local synagogue through song, which meant the house she grew up in was always full of music. She had an older sister named Rosa, a brother, and the kind of ordinary Jewish life that felt permanent until it suddenly wasn't. She was 19 when the anti-Semitic laws began rolling out across Slovakia, one after another over a period of months. Jews removed from schools, Jewish businesses shut down, yellow armbands made mandatory, property registered and then taken. It happened gradually, which is part of why so many families stayed. Each new law felt like the worst one until the next one came. By early 1942, the Slovak government had gone further than laws. They had signed an agreement with Nazi Germany to physically hand over their Jewish population. Slovakia agreed to pay Germany 500 Reichsmarks per person deported. Not receive money, pay it. For the removal of their own citizens. Helena was among the young women summoned under the labor service story. On the 25th of March, 1942, a train left from Poprad station in northern Slovakia, carrying close to 1,000 Jewish women, aged between 16 and 36. It crossed the Polish border overnight. The next afternoon, it stopped at Auschwitz. What happened at the platform took only a few hours. The women were processed, shaved, tattooed with prisoner numbers, and assigned to outdoor labor. The work was demolishing old Polish army barracks by hand so the camp could expand. When walls came down, anyone standing too close went down with them. Within the first weeks, women from that transport were dying at a rate that should have been impossible to witness and keep moving. Helena kept moving. Here is something worth understanding about Auschwitz that most people don't think about. Survival there had very little to do with willpower. It had almost everything to do with which commando, which work detail you were assigned to. The wrong assignment and you were outside in Polish winter weather doing physical labor until your body gave out. The right one, and you were indoors, near food, near water, away from the worst of it. Most prisoners never got to choose. The few who survived long enough to know the difference spent every moment trying to move toward something better. Helena heard about a warehouse operation where prisoners sorted through the belongings taken from people who had been killed on arrival. Clothes, luggage, valuables, all of it piled into enormous rooms that the prisoners had given a nickname, Canada, because Canada was a word that meant abundance to them, a faraway place where things were plentiful. Working there meant access to food that could be hidden, clothing that could keep you warm, a roof, and a slightly reduced chance of dying before the week was out. It was not safety. Nothing in that camp was safety. But it was a margin, and inside Auschwitz, a margin was everything. She found a way to get herself assigned there. That is where she was working the afternoon. A group of SS guards asked if any of the women knew how to sing. One of the SS guards working in that warehouse was a 20-year-old Austrian named Franz Wunsch. He had grown up in a small village in Lower Austria, joined the SS as a teenager, and by late 1942 was stationed at Auschwitz-Birkenau as part of the unit that oversaw the Canada sorting operation. He was not a senior officer. He was not someone with special authority or a remarkable history. He was a young man with a uniform and a gun in a place where that combination gave you total power over other human beings. Sometime in the autumn of 1942, a capo, one of the prisoner supervisors, went through the women's barrack asking if anyone could sing or perform something for one of the guards. The request was framed as a celebration, a birthday or a name day. Refusing was not really an option. Helena stepped forward. The only German song she actually knew was a tango from 1931 called Liebe war es nie, which translates roughly as "It was never love." The song had been written by two Jewish composers who had fled Vienna after the Nazis rose to power, which is a detail that history quietly buried until much later. She stood up and sang it. Wunsch asked her to sing it again. The next day, Helena was permanently reassigned within Canada to a position that kept her indoors, away from the worst of the outdoor conditions. A few days after that, she found a note on the ground near her workstation. She picked it up, read enough to see the word love written in it, and immediately destroyed it. Her reaction, in her own words, recorded decades later, was not complicated. She wanted nothing to do with an SS man. The uniform was not a person to her. It was the thing that had taken everything. But Wunsch kept finding ways. Small packages of food started appearing. Bread, biscuits, sometimes cheese, extra blankets, warm clothing that should not have been available to prisoners. He would pass close to her work area and say things quietly, warnings about upcoming roll calls, about which guards to avoid on certain days. Other women in the barrack noticed. Some of them were eating some of that food too because Helena shared what she was given. That did not stop them from resenting her for having it. The resentment was not irrational. Inside a place designed to kill people through starvation and exhaustion, watching one person receive food from a guard produced feelings that were completely understandable and deeply unfair to act on, and both of those things were true at the same time. Some women called her names. Some survivors who were interviewed about this period decades later said the jealousy was so sharp it felt physical. One said simply that everyone wanted what she had and hated themselves for wanting it. Meanwhile, Wunsch was doing something that should have gotten him executed under SS regulations. The Nuremberg racial laws, which the SS enforced absolutely within their own ranks, prohibited any intimate relationship between SS personnel and Jewish prisoners. It was called Rassenschande, racial defilement, and it carried the death penalty. He knew this. He continued anyway, cutting photographs of Helena from camp records and pasting them into outdoor scenes, countryside, and open skies, as though building an imaginary life with her in places that were nothing like where they actually were. Helena said that for a long time she felt only hatred when she looked at him. Then something shifted and she could not fully explain when or why. What she could explain was what happened the morning she heard her sister's name called at the gates. In October 1944, a transport arrived at Birkenau from Slovakia. The Slovak national uprising had just been crushed by German forces, and in the aftermath, thousands of Slovak Jews who had somehow survived 2 years of deportations were now being rounded up and sent east. Helena's older sister Rosa was on one of those transports. So was Rosa's husband. So were their 2 young children. Word moved fast inside the camp through the prisoner networks. Helena found out within hours that her sister had already been separated from the main group and directed toward the gas chambers. This was not unusual. Mothers with young children were almost never sent to the labor side of the selection. The children could not work, so the children were sent immediately, and the mothers went with them. Helena went to Wunsch. She told him her sister's name and where she had last been seen. His response, which she repeated word for word in her BBC interview decades later, was direct. He said, "Tell me quickly before it is too late." She told him Rosa had come with 2 small children. He said children cannot live here, and he ran. He reached the undressing area in time to pull Rosa out of the line by telling the guards there that she was already registered to his work detail in Canada. It was a lie that worked. Rosa was taken away, shaved, tattooed, and brought into the warehouse operation where Helena was working. Her family was killed that same day. Rosa never spoke about those hours to Helena. What she did say, years later in Israel, was that she had never forgiven her sister for saving her. She had wanted to go with her children. Helena had taken that choice away from her by sending Wunsch to the undressing room. That is the thing about impossible situations inside places like Auschwitz. There was no version of this where anyone came out without carrying something unbearable. The 2 sisters worked together in Canada through the remaining months of 1944 into January 1945. By then, the Soviet army was close enough that the Germans began evacuating the camp. On the 17th and 18th of January 1945, most surviving prisoners were forced out onto roads heading west into the Reich in the middle of winter. Before Helena left, a package arrived for her. Inside were warm clothes, woolen socks, and fur-lined boots. There was a note with them in German. It said, "Ich habe dich sehr geliebt. I loved you very much." It was from Wunsch. She and Rosa survived the evacuation and were among the prisoners liberated by Soviet forces on the 27th of January, 1945. Their parents had been killed in the gas chambers. Their brother had died trying to escape. Of the close to 1,000 young women who had boarded that train in Poprad in March 1942, only a tiny number were still alive. By July 1945, Helena and Rosa had made their way to Mandatory Palestine. Helena married, took a Hebrew name, Zipporah Tahori, had children, and built a life in Tel Aviv. She did not talk about what had happened, not publicly, not in detail, not for a long time. From Vienna, letters started arriving through the International Red Cross Tracing Service. Wunsch was writing to her. She did not write back. A family member eventually sent a reply on her behalf telling him to stop, that the blood of her sister's family would never be washed from his hands. The letters stopped. Helena got on with her life. Then, in 1971, a different letter arrived. This one was not from Wunsch, it was from his wife. Franz Wunsch had been arrested in August 1971. Austrian prosecutors had been building cases against former SS men for years, and Wunsch was now facing a criminal trial in Vienna for murder. The charges covered his role on the Birkenau arrival ramp, where incoming transports were met and sorted. The sick and the elderly and the children directed one way, the able-bodied another. Prosecutors also had witness accounts of him killing individual prisoners, including a Greek Jewish prisoner during a prisoner uprising in October 1944. His wife had written to Helena asking her to come to Vienna and speak on his behalf. Helena sat with that letter for a long time. Before she made her decision, she received threats. Other survivors contacted her, some furious, some pleading. The argument against going was straightforward. Wunsch had worked that ramp. Whatever he had done for her personally, he had also helped process thousands of people toward their deaths. Testifying for him meant standing in a courtroom and giving a man like that a better chance of walking free. Several survivors told her exactly what they thought of that. Some used words that are not easy to repeat. She went anyway. The trial ran for 31 days across April, May, and June of 1972 at the Vienna Regional Criminal Court. When Helena took the stand, she did not look at Wunsch. What she said was not a simple defense of him. She confirmed that he had saved her life and her sister's life. She confirmed that he had provided food and protection over more than 2 years inside the camp. She also confirmed that he had been present on the ramp, that he had participated in selections. She told the truth as completely as she knew it, which meant the truth contained both things at once. The man who had kept her alive and the man who had helped run the machinery that killed almost everyone around her. The jury acquitted him. They acquitted the other defendant, a guard named Otto Graf, as well. No SS officer was ever convicted of a war crime in a Vienna courtroom. Historians who later studied the trial noted that Austrian law at the time made convictions in cases like this extremely difficult, and that the political climate of early 1970s Austria was not one where juries were rushing to convict former SS men. The judge reportedly described the evidence of guilt as overwhelming. It made no difference. The reaction from the survivor community was severe and lasted decades. Helena was accused of having secured his acquittal with her testimony. She disputed that framing for the rest of her life. Her position was consistent. She had told the truth, the whole truth, not just the part that helped him. What the jury did with that was not something she controlled. Wunsch lived in Vienna as a commercial traveler until his death in February 2009. In his later years, he wrote letters that were read aloud in the 2020 documentary about this story. Letters in which he described the time at Auschwitz as the period when he had been most alive, most himself. One letter imagined a future where they would finally be together and keep the promises they had made each other. He mentioned winning the war in the same sentence. Helena died in Tel Aviv in June 2007, 2 years before him. She is buried at Yarkon Cemetery in Petah Tikva. The Israeli filmmaker Maya Sarfati spent years tracing every surviving witness, every letter, every photograph Wunsch had cut and pasted of Helena's face into peaceful outdoor scenes. The documentary she made, called Love It Was Not, was released in 2020 and reached audiences in more than 50 countries. At the center of it is an interview Helena gave to the BBC historian Lawrence Rees years before she died, where he asked her directly how she made sense of all of it. Her answer was, "I did not choose this. It simply happened." She said it about the love. She said it about the testimony. She said it about all of it, and she never changed her answer.